Alright, I understand that the title is going to make a lot of people think that they can just watch this video and then have a solid idea of how to get into competitive TF2 if they are curious about it. And I really would hate to bait those people, so I will include some stuff at the end. However, today I want to talk more about the actual sort of experience of getting into TF2 and how that has changed throughout the years, I suppose. Maybe even talk about my own experiences getting into sixes. And yeah. Also, I am aware that the demos are kind of like broken as far as the health is concerned. I don't know how to fix that. I've looked around a little bit. It's only when gaining health it seems to be like delayed, which is really weird. So if anyone knows any solutions, let me know. Right. Also, another aside is I have never actually asked or mentioned to subscribe to my channel. And I don't think it really matters whether I do or not, but I've been doing more commentating and editing on the Revival Tournaments channel, and they have been like just gaining a bunch. And I only think that because I've been like mentioning to subscribe to that channel, but yet I don't on my own videos. So I want to see if that actually works. So yeah, go ahead and do that if you aren't. Right. So getting into sixes. I have already talked in the past, and this is where I'll link a video in the cards, about the sort of hour count. And this does tie into my previous video talking about that competitive casual gap and how the actual difficulties in approaching competitive TF2 is less so about config choices and whitelist and things like that, and more so about the actual experience of having to play a grassroots competitive scene where you kind of need to like go somewhere to play. It's not just accessible in game, as well as the actual played environment being very different, because you're actually talking to people and coordinating things, and you kind of have to think about your decisions more. So that is sort of the main disconnect. But I think I also talked about sort of the hour count and what to sort of expect when you're getting into competitive TF2, because again, getting into that new sort of environment, it has a way of equalizing things, I'll say, in that someone with, let's say, 500 hours in the game and someone with 2,000 hours in the game, like 4 times as much, are going to be on relatively equal playing fields getting into sixes, because again, neither of them are going to have any experience in that played sixes environment with the communication and whatnot. Right. So, all that being said, let us begin by talking about, well, we'll start with my own experience getting into sixes and how that kind of mirrors things from my time and maybe mirrors things today. I'm sure there will be plenty of tangents, but yes. So I started following competitive TF2 as in watching streams, either casts, or I was a longtime Banny subscriber. This would have been back in probably 2015, maybe even as early as 2014, but I didn't actually play any sixes until 2016. That's when my first log shows up. So that was my first exposure to competitive TF2, and I actually played a lot of the Face It pugs were a thing at the time. I know Face It had some like 12v12 thing, that I was not playing the game while that was a thing, but they had 6v6 pugs for some time, so that's where I played a lot of, and those don't show up on your logs profile, so I honestly don't remember when that would have been. Probably like 2016 and 17 is when I really was on that pug grind, but I hadn't played a season yet. And with like life situations, as in like going to school, and only really being able to play on the weekends when I was home, as well as like later on when I actually had an apartment, my internet was really bad, so it just wasn't fun to play multiplayer games on it. Basically, for years and years, I was never really in a position to play a proper season, so I didn't. I kind of was just on and off TF2 for quite some time. And it wasn't until, 2021? 2020? Probably 2019, actually, around COVID, that I decided to try out an actual season. And it was season 6 of RGL. So I kind of have 2 experiences under my belt of getting into TF2 in the ESEA days, pre-RGL, and getting into TF2 again during the RGL era. And I can kind of contrast those experiences and whatnot. But yeah, you kind of have to put yourself out there, and that can be tough. I mean, a lot of community effort goes towards easing the way in which people can experience sixes, as in providing a sort of beginner environment for people to learn how to play, such as your newbie mixes, which I'll talk about at the end, or pugs that are intended for new players. And also like channels and different forums through which people can find teams is another one. Now that's something you kind of have to keep up to date on, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, it makes it easier when you can just sort of put yourself out there in a way that's at least a little more guided and not just straight up to the void. But yeah. Right. And then what else? We're talking about... Okay, nonetheless, we'll just move on to the next point. So when I was looking for this first team, I wasn't really sure what division to play because I had sixes experience. I wasn't like a newcomer player. And I was honestly like, okay, a lot of the people that I used to play with in Face It were now like advanced level players. I wasn't that ambitious, but I was curious about whether intermediate or main were going to be the divisions for me to play. So I kind of just tried out both of them just because. And intermediate felt a lot better. So that's where I ended up starting out. And yeah, my team was a lot of fun to play with, a lot of good people. And the thing with stuff like that is there's a certain level of pickiness that you can choose to have, because obviously, like, no one's perfect and no community is perfect. So there's going to be some people that might be like a little ragey, or you might just not really vibe with personally. Maybe you just don't like their sense of humor, or what have you. Or they're just like actual pieces of trash and like bigoted and stuff like that, which did happen. One of the teams I was going to try out for season 6, I joined their Discord, and not even like 5 minutes of just seeing what they were saying in general was enough for me to be like, okay, I'm not going to play with you guys tonight or at all. And I think since then, quite a few of them have been permanently banned. But nonetheless, I mean, that's something that is going to happen in any given community, which maybe I'm overselling that, because by and large, it's just a lot of people trying to play video games. But there's different personalities, different senses of humor, and different ways of expressing themselves that you won't always vibe with, as well as different intentions with the game. I mean, some people are just really down to grind and get better. Other people are just more interested in kind of having fun or doing silly things, stuff like that. So actually finding your people and finding who you like to play with might take a little bit of trial and error. But that's definitely part of the experience. And that was part of the experience for me, not only in trying to find a team to play on just to have a resume to go off of, but also, I mean, I ended up playing on multiple different teams with multiple different groups of people before I really settled on a friend group that I stuck with, basically. So yeah, right. What else? Well, let us talk about, yeah, let's talk about the old school kind of way of finding teams, because that was very much, well, still to this day, it's a bit of, you kind of need to know. You need to know like RGL and stuff like that. You need to sort of have those avenues, which have been smoothed down and like streamlined much better for new players than it was back in ESEA, where it was just kind of like some client that you joined, and then you had to find a team, and where you did that was a little ambiguous at times. You would oftentimes post in the TF2 forums, but if you don't know about that, then like, what are you going to do? But yeah, one thing that doesn't seem to be so much the case anymore, but was very much the case back in the day, was that people's first exposure to sixes or competitive TF2 in general was in a free league like UGC, but also just a group of players who are from the same pub server deciding to make a team and play together. And this is a very common experience from a lot of those old players, where it's like, yeah, I just sort of mained this server and recognized a lot of the people there. And either there was someone there who played sixes as well, or played competitive and like told me about it and how to play, or there were 6 of us or 9 of us who wanted to kind of play on a team and put things together. And I was no exception to this, actually. I used to play on a low gravity Mario Kart server. And I still, like, I had hundreds, if not like thousands of hours on that map. And that was like my main server for the majority of my casual play. And yeah, there were a lot of regulars. And I actually tried to organize a Highlander team with these regulars. This was before I had ever played any form of competitive TF2. Again, I really just played this this pub community server. And I tried to organize a Highlander team. Now, that never took off. And in fact, it was really funny because we didn't know how anything worked. We didn't know how to organize scrims or anything like that. So we actually tried to, for our first scrim, just do it in TF2 Center and just try to like stack the team with all our guys. And like, so if someone else joined our team, was like, hey, we're trying to play as a team, can you switch off? And like, it never ended up running, which is hilarious in retrospect. But that does highlight something that I have mentioned in the past, where it was more common, I think, back in the day for people to just kind of try out competitive play. There wasn't much of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Not faux pas, but it wasn't as, maybe faux pas is the right word. I don't know. I don't know French. But yeah, it didn't have as much weight to it as it does nowadays. And I think that, yeah, people were just willing to kind of try a UGC season or something like that, pretty low stakes, just to see what it was like. And I should mention as well, I know that the kind of casual versus quick play thing is a massive debate in the community. And I don't really have much of an opinion there, but I will say, like, objectively speaking, that quick play, at least back then, did certainly help a lot of competitive teams get formed, in the sense that you really only found these main servers that you kind of just logged into every day, because you just sort of queued into it one day and then just added it to your favorites and then returned because you liked it enough. That was the case with me in that Mario Kart server. And yeah, now you can make the case that that is because of the quick play queuing system, or you can make the case that any way of forming teams back then is going to be taking into account the structures and standards that exist at the time, which of course is also true. So yeah, who knows where the bias begins there, but nonetheless, that was very true. It was a very commonplace experience. You ask a lot of these players who play competitive TF2 and started playing it forever ago, that was their experiences. Like, yeah, I started off with a UGC team with like this group of friends. That was pretty standard. Now, I should mention that I think that content and content creation has always played a role in getting people into competitive TF2. This is something that I haven't really considered too much until recently, but not only with my own channel, but seeing other people post about competitive TF2 and talk about it, and getting some buzz around it, because like it's just okay. We'll get back to that thought in a moment. But yeah, you get to actually see the positive impact, not just from people telling me that they tried out competitive because of my videos, but even people from the prior generation. I mentioned that I was a longtime Banny subscriber. I never would have played competitive TF2 if I didn't watch a ton of his streams and sort of familiarize myself with the format, or at least be enticed into the format as a result. Right. As well, I should mention someone like Tag as well, who at the recent Denver LAN spoke about kind of how weird it was to have all these people come up to him and be like, hey, like I used to watch your videos when I was like 15 or whatever. And while I didn't actually get to talk to him specifically about that, I would imagine that the implication for a lot of those people is I started playing competitive because of your videos, or at least got interested in it because of those videos. So I do think that the content sphere has always played a role, and I hope it continues to, because I think that, and this is the point I was stuttering on earlier and didn't want to throw in quite yet. I think that there's a lot, like you can actually make arguments and objective fact-based cases for sixes and why it is good and competitive and whatnot. But I think just showing that it's fun and that people have fun playing it really does so much as far as get people interested. Because that is what video games are about at the end of the day. And that's also a very easy thing to do, I think. And that's something that hasn't really been on my radar until relatively recently, I would say. But anyway, that aside, what else is new? What else has changed? Well, there's definitely more streamlined avenues, as I talked about, because RGL specifically has put a lot of focus on getting new players involved, which I think makes sense. Because the easier it is to sign up and play sixes, the more people are going to do so. And the more people that try something like sixes, the more people are going to end up enjoying it. Obviously, not everyone will. It is funny. Every time I mention like, oh, it's like really fun, like this is why people like to play it and whatnot, there's always someone, sometimes multiple people, being like, yeah, but I wouldn't like it. I'm like, okay, you don't have to. Some people do. The whole point is that, like, yeah, it's not going to be for everyone, but it's going to be for some people. Right. So yeah, I think that focus on making the experience a little easier for newer players, definitely nice. What else is there? I'm curious how much longer is in this demo. It's apparently a long time. Interesting. Okay. Next up we have... I guess I'll talk about... Yeah, why don't we talk about some of the sort of new... or the institutions in place nowadays to make it easier to get into sixes. So, I think that one of the most important things to expose yourself to is the actual played experience of sixes. As I've already mentioned, that's kind of the real gap. And while it's important to have tutorials or guides or things like that, which are a lot of the videos I make, go over kind of specific topics and from a sort of tutorial-esque perspective. And I remember when I started playing as well, I mean, I was watching Habib's Book of the Demo Man series that he made like 1 or 2 videos on and never finished. But it was still like very informative and really, really helped calibrate me for getting my reps in those face-it pugs to actually kind of critically think about what I was doing rather than just be a zombie and not actually learn, which could be the case for some people. So yeah, it is nice to learn the actual specifics, to learn the metagame and things like that. But again, and this is something I brought up in that video about sort of the hour count and getting into sixes. you can study up on Ubers, how to count them, how to play different margins and stuff like that, but you won't actually understand Ubers until you're caught to one because you weren't paying attention, and then it dawns on you, oh, I wasn't paying attention to Ubers, and then you do that next time. And actually, in time, you will develop a like Uber clock, sort of, to how long it takes to build, and you're gonna be able to like anticipate or just feel out when it's disad, when it's ad, without even having to think actively about it, just through experience. And while yes, understanding all those metagame things, tips and tricks, how to play different positions as different roles, your map review, stuff like that, those are all important, but actually getting some reps in, I think, matters the most. Because it's very easy to do a map review and it's like, okay, I'm supposed to play in that position in that circumstance. But to understand what circumstance is even happening, or like not just be a deer in the headlights, it's important to just have some reps in again. So I think that the best competitive resources for new players are ones that establish environments in which new players can just get those reps in, can just play in a space that's not judgmental and easier for them to kind of tackle. And there's a few examples of those. I will mention that basically everything I'm talking about here is going to apply mostly to North America. If anyone is familiar with the European scene and what the beginner resources are like in the summer of 2025, from that perspective, or for South American TF2, Brazil Fortress, Asia Fortress, Oz Fortress, any of that, please leave a comment. I'll aggregate all those into a pinned comment, I'm sure. And yeah. So anyway, some of those nice entry-level experiences, and the ones that I usually go to recommend, are newbie mixes, which run on Fridays, and were some of the first sixes I played as well. So it's a very, very long-standing, structure isn't necessarily the right word, thing, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's existed for a long time. And again, it's very much dedicated to, hey, let's just set up a environment where someone who has never played sixes at all can dip their toes and kind of see what the experience is like and whether they kind of like it enough to pursue things further, which is fantastic. Another such example is the TF2 Coaching Central Discord, which is a relatively new phenomenon, I'd say past few years, definitely in the RGL era. And as the name implies, just kind of dedicated towards teaching players the game. And they will run newbie pugs, which again, kind of that environment, dedicated to exposing new players to competitive play, see what it's like, toe dipping, and etc. Right. What are some other things? I don't really mention TF2 Center too much, but that historically has been the kind of place where you go just pug if you don't really know much else. As far as whether I recommend it or not, it's kind of hard to say because I don't personally play it very much and I don't enjoy TF2 Center too much. It's more so, it's a mixed bag because sometimes you're just going to get people like adding up and trolling because again, they're not like super serious in that sense, but they're accessible, which I guess is important and worth mentioning. Some people have been adding up to RGL pugs, which I don't really recommend for brand new players because you're going to have a lot of pretty experienced players. And it's really just not the environment where people are trying to cater towards teaching new players how to play, which puts you at risk, I'd say, of toxicity, which is really unfortunate because a lot of people are just like dickheads for no reason. Like someone will be obviously new at the game. And yeah, like someone just can't set aside their ego. To be fair, a lot of these players aren't actually good. And it's a lot of like the same names that pop up where it's like, yeah, this person was just like an asshole to me in a pug for no reason. Yeah, no, believe me, they're assholes to the experienced players too. But yeah, it's not something I necessarily recommend for new, like brand new players, just because again, while they're accessible, they are gonna be a pretty mixed bag. And I'd say it's a good idea to actually start walking before hitting the ground running in that respect. Which isn't to say like if you're like new, you shouldn't touch those at all, but it's more so you should have some experience in at least, so that when you're playing against those better players, you're actually going to get something out of it rather than just getting completely rolled and being like, oh, wow, this is what sixes is like, I guess. Oh, my door just slammed. Hope that wasn't too loud. Right. What else? Honestly, if you happen to be in one of those communities where you have 6 friends or like 12 people, it's really not that difficult to just try sixes on your own. If you get a server from ServeMe, which is like free to rent, those come with all the sixes maps on them and all the sixes configs on them. So you just, in the menu, when you're booking that server, just select like the RGL config or whatever and select your map. And then you're going to have a connect that you can join with your people and just play. Likewise, if you want to go that route, then you can just be finding a scrim if you are so inclined. Again, this isn't something that people really do just because they don't know about it. It's sort of a need to know type of deal. But if you want to play like a newcomer scrim, then there are avenues to do that. You just get 6 people together and find a scrim at scrim time, which is usually done through like the RGL Discord. There's a scrims channel to coordinate stuff like that. But if you have 12 people, then sure, just play sixes, run pugs if you want. That's absolutely something that you can do on your own if you have the people for it. And a nice thing about that sort of experience is that it is going to be exactly what you cater it to. Let's say you're just playing with 12 people that maybe you want to try like some off-classing or whatever. Okay, go ahead and do that. Or if you want to try like a specific thing or play on a certain map, things like that, those are all going to be very accessible to you, even though you might not know it. So anyway, that's probably all from me today. Yeah, the main pain point for getting into competitive play is just literally getting into it. Because there's a lot of things that, I mean, people in the community put a lot of work into making things easier, making things more streamlined, but it's going to be inherently difficult for a grassroots scene to get players to try things out, just because it's inherently going to be less accessible than if there was just a button in like the menu of the game, right? So actually getting into a server and playing sixes is the real hurdle. From there, you're just gaining experience. You're just getting better, whether you realize it or not. And if you enjoy it, then you can go on to more of the established things. You can try and play a season. You can play more of these different pug places and whatnot. That being said, you can probably just sign up for a season even if you're completely brand new. And in fact, Newbie Mixes runs teams as well. They will sponsor teams for an RGL season and assign a coach to them for the express purpose. Again, a lot of people put a lot of work into making it easier to learn sixes and just play it. But yeah, at some point you gotta get your foot through the door if you are interested. So anyway, hopefully that was a useful little primer as well as a little bit of context as to what it's kind of like getting into competitive TF2. And yeah, again, I know that most people aren't subscribed to my channel and I want to see if it actually works if I tell people to. So do that if you haven't. But yeah, that's all from me. Hope you guys enjoyed and we'll see you all later.